Colin, thanks very much for joining us for this conversation for the conference taking place in Titanic, organised by the Glencree Peace Centre and by Roisin McGlone, under the heading Afterthought, kind of one word that captures, I suppose, how people were left behind in the big political and peace agreements of the 1990s. And I know that that's something very close to your heart.
Yeah, it is. I mean, the first thing, Barney, it's important for me to stress is that I'm an artist. Putting paint on bits of cloth, that's what I do. And anything that I have learnt, or even anything that I have to say, has come through first-hand experience of working and spending time with people who suffered loss through the dark days here. But I suppose my interest in what was going to be left behind started in 1998, Good Friday Agreement. And I had this view at the time, perhaps it was a naive view, that this was going to be good news for us all. And as I read the agreement before I ticked yes, I was left with this nagging doubt that there was a lot in it for the perpetrators. It was going to be good as a result for us as a society, but there was nothing in it save for a few lines for the victims and survivors. And as time went on, Barney, I realised that this massive section of our community, I mean, I've talked about this before, but this massive section of our community was really paying the price for everybody else's peace. Where that mark for yes was a good news for us, a start of hope, a beginning of hope for us as a society. For so many people who suffered loss through the Troubles, it marked an end of hope.
In terms of justice?
Justice and answers. And in some ways, the answers are just as important, if not more, when we've come to this point. But I realised that, this, as I say, this massive section of our community was paying the price for everybody else's peace. And I realised that in the rhetoric of us as a society needing to move on, there were tens of thousands of people living in our midst, many of which were incapable of moving on.
They were being left behind.
They were being completely left behind. Even the words moving on was an insult because they hadn't even been given the chance.
You say that you're an artist, but you've been able to make a very powerful statement with your paint and your brushes. And part of that powerful statement was the exhibition you painted, Silent Testimony. And you've said to me many times that that's not an exhibition that's about the past. It's about the here and now. It's about the present. And that those people who we've just described as being left behind, for them, their past is today.
That's correct. Yeah. I think that is the key to the exhibition. Although, beside each of the 18 paintings, there is a little bit of text that I wrote that relates to the stories. That's the only reference to the past.
And it's a very neutral text.
Well, it has to be.
You don't talk about people being brutally murdered or other terms. You simply state the facts. That's correct, isn't it?
It's like, it did start off with adjectives and adverbs. But as I refined the texts, I found myself removing and editing an awful lot out. And I let the paintings become the adjectives and the adverbs. The other parts that I removed were the reference to what background someone had. There's no reference to Protestant and Catholic. There's no reference to IRA, UVF, SAS. What I wanted to look at was raw human loss right now.
Universal loss.
In a place, Barney, where, as you know, sadly and tragically, there still is a difference in certain parts of this place to Protestant loss and Catholic loss, Catholic loss and Protestant loss. And what I wanted to do is have people walk into that room and not know, but look at a father's grief, having lost his child, and another father's grief, and not be able to separate them. Because so often in this society, that was what we did. And it became part of the tribal aspect of living in this place.
The eyes in those portraits, many people have commented about those 18 sets of eyes, how loudly they speak. Were you surprised at the response to the exhibition? I think over 100,000 people have now visited it. It's become a sacred place. I think it was Eamon Malley who likened it to the Stations of the Cross. What has been your reaction to that reaction and that response to Silent Testimony?
Silent Testimony started off for me as a very personal kind of quest. Whenever I started making my head paintings in 2010, I realised as an artist I may have found the vehicle through which to express my deeply held views and emotions on where we were as a society and what we were doing for those people who really counted in this place. My idea was simply to paint a couple of paintings of people who suffered loss, and I spoke to Wave about that, and Wave offered to partner me and to introduce me. And as time went on and we got a few names of people to paint, we realised that we needed to broaden it. We needed to make sure that if anybody walked into that room to see the paintings, that they would be touched and would feel close to at least one of the stories. It could relate to them. And yeah, what I would say, Barney, about the eyes and about the way they're done is that I painted what I saw, and I painted what I felt. Whenever I went into each of those homes to spend 2 to 3 hours with the people, drawing them, photographing them, or the people came here, these are people who hadn't had an opportunity to tell their story at all. No one had been interested.
That's the afterthought, isn't it?
Yeah. And what I was doing was I was coming in as an artist, and I was suddenly interested in what they had to say. Partly because I knew I had a task to do to make the painting. And with any painting that I make, I need to have as much information as I can. And so getting to know the person is critical.
A lot of trust there.
But yeah, I mean, and I don't take that for granted at all. But what I would say is I built everything into the paintings. This is nothing in comparison to the trauma which these people are daily carrying. But it was a traumatic experience for me to spend a year closely working with 18 people, hearing their stories. I've got to say, Barney, in the graphic detail that you'll be aware of, you know that we got sanitized sound bites at the time. What often made the lunchtime news didn't make the evening news because something else had occurred. And it was normally somebody has been shot dead. Somebody has been caught in a bomb attack. But I was hearing the graphic horror of what it meant for a father to witness the aftermath of their child being caught in a bomb attack, what that actually literally meant, what that looked like. And what I decided to do, Barney, is build any trauma that I felt back into the painting. I was using my art as a way to deal with that myself. So hopefully the power of that comes through in the actual paintings.
I think everyone has seen that it does. And you know what you've just said. I mean, I talk about it as people becoming numbers in news. What you were face to face with was the very personal impacts and stories that extend across a very long period of time. And the other thing about silent testimony is that while it relates obviously to this place, it can read over into other places. And you've taken that exhibition to many other parts of the world. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, yeah, I mean, we showed it in Belfast 2015 through to 2016 at the Ulster Museum, who have partnered me on this as well. We showed it in Paris after that, in Derry, in Dublin Castle, the National Memorial Arboretum across in England, and we were invited to show it at the UN in New York, which was incredible. It was incredible because we were able to bring some of the people who sat for me out to it as well. And as I remember speaking and having the paintings behind me and seeing some of the people who'd sat for me standing there in the group as well. And I remember thinking, this is the power of art. This is actually, this is art used right. This is where art can inform and speak, but not preach. Very important to stop to not preach. This is where, you know, I'm stopping short of telling people what to think. I'm just putting 18 paintings up on the wall as facts.
And letting people think
and
for
letting
themselves.
people fill the gaps in themselves and come to their own conclusions. But no, a real privilege for me to be able to air those stories, which haven't been aired even here before, in a political arena like the UN.
Yeah, I remember, and I think I contacted you after the first time I saw the exhibition in the Ulster Museum. On the feedback sheet, I wrote something like "more of this."
Yeah.
And you know, I noticed, and I did this myself, that people look at the portraits, and then they sit down and they have a moment of themselves, and they think. And I think that's the importance of the space. And I suppose, you know, what I've thought about since I've seen it is, what is its place in some kind of permanent place of remembrance that allows us to properly think about the conflict years and where we are now. Do you see silent testimony at some stage having some wider role than you anticipated when you first put paint on your brushes and started those portraits?
I mean, it's already had that role which I couldn't even have thought of. As I said at the start, this was a personal project for me. I spent a year making this work because I needed to do it for myself, because that was how important I thought the many tens of thousands of people living here, daily living with loss through the troubles were and still are. I think it's so it's a real surprise to me that 100,000 people here have seen it. It's a real surprise that people have been able to use it as a memorial in their own right. You know, where they're not just looking at one person's face, but they're looking at a society. They're looking at us as a people, full stop. And that's almost something I can't lay claim to. I've heard a great quote, and I'll tell you it now, and that is that there can be as much creativity in engaging with a work of art as there was in the making of that work of art. So I think people bring their own creativity to viewing art, and I think that's what's happening here. I think people. So if 100,000 people view the exhibition, it's like there's 100,000 different exhibitions.
Oh, you can imagine. Yeah.
And so I would love to think that it would have a role. I think it has already had a role.
Yeah.
I would love to think that further it would have a role, not just as a warning to us, but in order to allow us as a society to start to scratch the surface of our past, which really, Barney, we haven't started to do. 25 years on, next year, we haven't really scratched the surface of dealing with what we really did to each other in this place as human beings.
Perhaps we're afraid to, but I know that you describe yourself as the artist with the brush, but you have been very vocal in recent times about the UK government legislation, which is meant to be about addressing our past, but I'm not asking you to say this, but I think most people look at it as a running away from the past, you know, rather than trying to do something that would genuinely help. What has annoyed you most about that UK government legislation?
The complete disdain and inhumane approach to dealing with people who need our compassion more than anything else. These are people who have sacrificed the most for peace. These are people who have had to forego answers, justice in their lives. These are people who have been lied to since their loved one was taken away from them by someone else's hand. And we are yet again kicking them when they're down, sweeping under the carpet what is most important to them. And that I cannot be quiet about. Look, Barney, dealing with the past is one of the hardest things that we can possibly do, that anybody can do. That's not lost on me at all. This is a difficult, long process. But I will tell you this for sure, that it's not as hard as picking up the pieces of your loved one from the street after they've been blown to bits. Nothing is as hard as that. So running away from it, saying it's too hard, trying to whitewash the whole thing and say, right, let's just start from scratch, let's pretend this didn't occur, with the lie that this process that is proposed will lead towards reconciliation and more answers. It's an insult.
Yeah. You know my position, and I have felt for a long time that this is something that we can't deal with ourselves. I certainly don't believe that a British government should be drawing up a plan and imposing it. I believe that this should be scripted and shaped internationally, written by pens free of emotional link, is how I've described it on occasions. Do you think it is too late to recover or to pull back from what the UK government intends to do? And if it is too late, what is the consequence of that?
That's not really for me to say. I don't know. Look, I would be of the opinion that nothing is ever too late. I think that there have been mistakes in the past made with good intentions in trying to resolve the tangled web of our past in this place. This is not a mistake with good intentions.
It's deliberate, you mean?
So what I would be saying, so this is something that I believe needs stopped and rethought. It is something that the victims themselves need to be included in. As a patron of WAVE, and engaging in an ongoing way with victims and survivors, I've got to say they have got to be central in whatever process there is. Their needs have got to be met. Barney, I'll tell you what would make the issue go away for them is if we were able to bring their loved ones back from the dead. That would make it go away. Everything else we do as a society will fall short of that. These people will still be dealing with their loss. We should never look at it as a tokenistic thing. We should never look at dealing with the past as a tick list. We need, and healing in this place, I believe, cannot take place until we have started to heal the wounds in those people who count most.
And yet you think this has opened the wound?
But it has.
Wider.
I don't think, I know it has. I've spoken to many people who are re-traumatized. It's bringing them right back to that minute whenever they received the phone call, or somebody arrived at the door, or they saw their loved one lying on the street. It's brought them right back to it. But it's not just brought them right back to it, it's brought them right back to that scene and given them a kick in the teeth.
Just as a final question, do you believe, given what you've just said, that nothing short of bringing back someone's loved one is going to be good enough? Do you believe that there is healing in truth and reconciliation?
Yes, I absolutely have faith that there is. This goes beyond repentance or forgiveness. The forgiveness and repentance have nothing to do with this. It has got to do with acknowledging what we did to each other in this place as humans, not as Protestants or Catholics. And it also comes down to the fact that this whole idea that there's nothing more that we can do. There's a huge amount that we can do. And really, what struck me with sitting down with people for hour upon hour and drawing them and just spending time with them was that they were appreciative that I was just there. They didn't need me to do anything else than just be there.
Hear them.
That helped. And yet we think so in some ways, we need to start by doing that. We need to start by saying, we acknowledge your pain. We know you're here. We know that you are holding this place together. You're paying the price for everybody else's peace. And in some ways, their hands are tied. Back whenever you look at the Good Friday Agreement, you know, the protagonists there, the key players there, had bargaining chips. Victims and survivors don't have that. They were, I was going to say wrong place at the wrong time. They were always right place at the right time. It was the perpetrator who was wrong place at the wrong time. And but that being said, I'm still always filled with hope, because any of the people who suffered loss who I meet and spend time with, they still have hope. In some ways they have nothing but hope. And that is something that I find one of the most remarkable things. The upbeat sense that many people have. The sense that they still want to live. But we owe them in this society a huge debt.
And we need to start paying it.
Yeah.